Good morning, everyone. I am Dungeon Master Andrew here with Natural 40 Games, and today I will be talking about Vecna Eve of Ruin. I have a very firm belief that you can only properly review a campaign book after you have run it. And this past weekend, the last weekend of February in 2025, my party completed this campaign. Now, I have enjoyed this campaign, but there's things I want to talk about it because there are some situations that I think need a little bit more expanding upon. Now, this campaign started 72 weeks ago in the middle of October in 2023, and I did not jump straight into this book because this book wasn't even out yet. I began running a campaign with Curse of Strahd. So, we went in, we did Curse of Strahd. I love this campaign. This is the third time I ran Curse of Strahd. This is my home game with my good friends. Curse of Strahd went fantastic. So, my party went from scourging the land of Barovia clean of vampires, getting the great wealth and power of all of the artifacts and special magical items from that campaign, and going straight into Eve of Ruin from there. The transition was seamless, as I had begun the Curse of Strahd campaign in the town of Phandalin of the Lost Mines of Phandelver or the Icespire Peak box set. I made that town spooky and haunted and under a siege of darkness, and from there the party journeyed into Barovia. And once they were done in Barovia, they worked in to Eve of Ruin. Now, we went chapter by chapter. So, first thing that the party was able to do was travel from Phandalin to Neverwinter. They were very close to one another. It was 4 days travel, and I gave them a level 1 appropriate Goblin Bandit encounter just for giggles, and that was like a... They turned that into almost a little mini charity operation for these poor goblins, which was absolutely hilarious. We made it into Neverwinter from there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say this right now. Huge spoilers for this campaign. Do not watch this if you are in the midst of being a player or plan to be a player, because I will be spoiling huge twists and turns in this conversation that I'm having now. So, Chapter 1 is called Return from the Never Death Graveyard. This campaign is to begin at a very high level, at level 10. So they don't give you... They don't give you any information in this book about the city of Neverwinter. There's no map, there's no shops, there's no nothing. So I went back into some older materials to flesh that chapter out a little bit more, gave them a chance to do some shopping basically I used the map from the Neverwinter Nights 1 video game and took some of my experience from playing that game a long, long time ago into this campaign. So, they got into Neverwinter, did some shopping, had a good time, and they met with Lord Neverember, who gave them the quest to rescue the hostages from the graveyard, which went fairly well. I enjoyed this little dungeon crawl. It was there were some nice puzzles, there were some nice challenges, and my players, always being a creative sort, went through, and the genie, the Marid, and the water elementals, they went ahead and reunionized the Clockwork Guild to sort out those challenges. Then they went forth, slayed a whole bunch of cultists, rescued a few, and went and did the final encounter in this dungeon that leads them to be drawn into a spooky version of Neverwinter that's called Evernight. So they go into a version of Neverwinter that is, rivers of lava and huge amounts of different things, a corpse market filled with vampires and undead and stuff. And once again here, I felt like there could have been a lot more detail. There could have been a lot more challenge. Making it... One of the things about this campaign is it is not a location-based adventure where you get a ton of places to go and explore. It is very much a sort of point-by-point exploration through the multiverse, and each and every one of those points suffers from not having enough information. This environment here, the corpse market, all it is 2 pages where you get given, you're supposed to run into a vampire in the corpse market who is going to give you a tip on how to get back to the prime material plane, where my party had just finished Curse of Strahd, so they actually bartered the Tome of Strahd for this information. So I made something of that based on my player's history, which really worked out well. Now, the Dolendar Tomb, I really enjoyed. The puzzle aspect of that is always fun. I love puzzles in dungeons. That's one of the best things I love about running a campaign is there's puzzles and dungeons to pick up and use. It saves me a whole bunch of preparation work. The battle was in there. They made it back into the prime material plane, and they settled down for a little bit, you know. They got gifted the house by Lord Neverember, and one of the cultists they rescued became their housekeeper, and it was pretty nice until the wish happens. Now, once again, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. The Wizards 3 is Chapter 2. And how this chapter begins is Illustrial Silverhand, Mordenkainen, and Tasha the Witch craft a wish in order to stop Vecna, and that ends up summoning the party, which is important. Because I ran Curse of Strahd leading into this, my players already knew Mordenkainen. Now, once again, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Mordenkainen that summons you is an imposter. They are not one of the Wizards 3. They are a vampire lord, Cass the Betrayer, someone who is very firmly linked into D&D lore of Vecna. Now, they immediately clocked that Mordenkainen was an imposter. And that caused an amazing battle to begin right within the Sanctum, right in Chapter 2. Tasha and Illustrial were facing the wish stress because they had tried to alter reality with this, so they were not part of the battle. And it just so happens my level 11 party that just got done feeding Strahd his own face had everything going for them to fight vampires. They were level 11 at the time, and the stat block for Cass the Betrayer is challenge rating 23. Powerful, powerful combatant, plus 15 to hit with his sword. Strength of the Night, regeneration, spider climb, but sunlight hypersensitivity. So, the paladin pulls out the sunblade, bathes everything in daylight. Cass has disadvantage on everything, and they stomp him down. 2 rounds, nothing. The paladin smite. The fighter blows his action surge. My 2 wizards going really hot with big spells. No difficulty there. And it says in here, if the players, there's actually some things in here that potentially account for if the players discover the secret identity. He's got a powerful artifact called the Crown of Liars. And with that, he is undetectable. His lies always seem like truth. But because the players had met Mordenkainen, they were able to deduce that he was in fact a liar, because this was not the same Mordenkainen that they had just dealt with in Barovia. Now, right in here, it says that should Cass be discovered, you can skip ahead all the way to chapter... Oh, geez, what was it? Skip ahead to chapter 1 or chapter 9 from chapter 2 if you discover Cass. So that's like, oh yeah, if they discover Cass, just skip the majority of the book. I wasn't going to do that. So I restructured the main quest to find the Rod of 7 Pieces and still sent the party on that quest because I felt like not doing that and saying like, oh yeah, you're all level 18 now from 11 and welcome to Pandemonium. That would have been highly unsatisfying. I would not really have felt like I had run this campaign. So I restructured things to still send them on the journey. So they went on to the journey to find the Rod of 7 Pieces, thinking that that will be the key in defeating Vecna, as despite Cass's plan, Vecna still needed to be dealt with, as Tasha and Illustrial was able to convince them. So the first thing they did was they went to the Web's Edge. Web's Edge is another location in the Forgotten Realms that is a tangled web of spiders. The servants of Lolth are doing some bad Lolth stuff, and they have one of the rods of 7 pieces parts, and you got to go get it. So my players treated this almost entirely as a social challenge. They had stolen the rod of the. They had stolen the Crown of Liars and gave it to one of the wizards. The other wizard was a changeling with expertise in deception, and the fighter and the paladin were able to be disguised as well with magic spells. So they infiltrated, shed no blood, did no combat, got right through and stole the rod of 7 pieces, having barely any issues. Their roles were fantastic. Their arguments were convincing. There's a whole bunch of demons and spider creatures in here, as well as the really weird spider dragon that is just a really weak encounter. The spider dragon had basically the stats of a young dragon compared to the monster manual, so it would not have actually been an intense fight as written. And this is around the point where I really started to realize that this book does not have intensely challenging combats. And I kind of put that in the back of my head. So they found the first rod of the first piece of the rod. Then they went forth back to the sanctum from there, and they began Chapter 3, The Lambent Zenith's Voyage. This is the Spelljammer chapter. And they got introduced into the Astral Sea. They had to fight some terrifying alien creatures. They found the shattered boat with the Githyanki and various other crew members and realized that the rod piece is here somewhere. They journeyed through. There was some interesting social machinations, but a lot more monster fighting in this one. And as they realized they were on the body of a god called Havoc, that god was taken up as the fighter's deity that he continued to worship and pray to for the rest of the campaign, which was absolutely fantastic. That led to some wonderful character moments as we went through here. So once again, they fought through. There was nothing really approaching any sort of challenge. And each of these 2 chapters, Web's Edge and the Lambent Zeniths, these entire chapters took a single session each when we were just engaging with the content as written here. So, they helped the angel, Ida Malarai. They repaired her wing, and they fought the Heartalod within the heart of Havoc. So they won, they got the loot, they got the other stuff, and then they moved on back to Sigil and went into Chapter 4, The Ruined Colossus. This takes place in the world of Eberron. And once again, this book does not give you nearly enough information about the settings and places it's exploring. It didn't give you enough about Neverwinter. It didn't give you enough about the strange shadow, fiery Neverwinter. And it doesn't give you enough about Eberron to really appreciate this. And this is the point where I realized I need to put more into this journey, because chapters 2, 3, and 4 were all 1 session each. Just 1 session, just engaging with the content, going in, fighting, looting, done. So, after this, one of the players was like, hey, this feels like we're just playing one-shots. And I'm like, yeah, I know, this kind of sucks. We gotta figure this out a little bit more. So after the Eberron chapter, now the Eberron chapter was still good. Dealing with the plight of the Warforged actually inspired me to go and get the Eberron campaign setting guidebook and run some Eberron content in my other campaigns, which I have enjoyed doing and I'm going to do more of in the future. And so we defeated that. There was some good battles. This is where I really upgraded the challenge. Glaive here, a challenge rating 11, boss fight with 190 hit points is just that's going to be one-rounded by my party at this point. They are a fierce fighting machine with the fighter, paladin, and wizard. There's just so much they can take care of so very quickly. So I made this combat a lot more difficult. and that made it so much more satisfying to overcome. The first couple chapters were like a victory lap after Barovia, and then things got to get really intense. So, after we had finished with Eberron, which again was just a single session, we went back to Barovia in chapter 5. And because I had just run Curse of Strahd with this group, I knew I needed to make this chapter hit hard. As written, you pop right in front of the Death House and go in and explore it. And that's all you need to do. That would have been a single session once again. So, what do? I put them on the opposite side of the map of Barovia. Because I've got Curse of Strahd, I know who's there, and I time shifted it 50 years after they had left. Because that's one thing I did. When they went to Barovia and came back, 3 years had passed when that journey was perhaps 3 weeks in time. And when they went back, 50 years had passed. They had left Irina in charge of the town of Barovia, and she had become a distinguished matronly leader that had very well-drilled crossbow arbalists ready to defend their land. Victor Vakalovich had become the burgomaster of Valakai, and he was withered and dying-looking because of his involvement with some of the dark gifts from the Amber Temple. And furthermore, the people of Krizek had torn down their wall and expanded their beautiful sort of food forest farmland. The winery was flourishing and doing amazing. And the Death House was invisible. And because it was invisible, that was something I had did in the initial one. They had traveled through the basements of the inn within Phandalin and came out in the crypts of the Death House and came up from underneath and out into Barovia proper. This, they went in the front door. And I really de-emphasized the NPC follower, Salasruda Alistar, because I was using this to tell my own story. Because Strahd was defeated, and I'm not going to say Strahd is back for this, but they didn't defeat Rahadan when they played that campaign. So I had Rahadan cosplaying as Strahd, trying to rekindle his master's power over this land. So this was a super fun dungeon crawl, and the other thing that I had brought forth from my previous campaign was the Banshee from Phandelver, where they had treated with her in order to get information about this strange land of death that was imposing upon the prime material plane, and they had left her in the Death House when they first went to Barovia. So I leveled her up. I made her a challenge rating 24 Banshee. That deathly wail was a Constitution 19 save to not go down to 0 with, and we had a thrilling fight in the higher floor in the Death House here. And then they went down into the crypts and found the piece of the rod, fought the demons below, and this was, because I had taken the time, this turned into a 3-session chapter. We explored Barovia, met up with the old people, traveled through, and they were very deliberate and thoughtful. It turned less into a go, 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 more like, look at how we have affected this world. And that is truly a powerful thing to be able to do with a party. Then, after they had gotten out of it, the encounter with Strahd, which is Rahadan, came forth, and the really interesting hauntings came forth. I really enjoyed these encounters. These were really fun to give them sort of like ephemeral puzzles that they had to sort through in order to continue through with this dungeon. And after they had defeated Rahastrad and gone outside, I actually turned the Death House itself into a monster. I reflavored the Iron Golem stats and basically used those to fight against the party. So they had to defeat the Banshee, defeat Strahadon, and then defeat the house itself and all the other demons within. And that's when I realized that this campaign will absolutely benefit from the extra care and attention that I know I can add into a wonderful campaign. Now, the Night of Blue Fire. This was another chapter that I really spent my time with. I love the world of Krynn. I have read so many of the Dragonlance novels. I have run Shadow of the Dragon Queen twice. So this is a world that I knew. So they rolled in, and the magical tree, the Pelion tree, was in a disastrous state. And what does my party do? They invoke the power of the Fate card from the Deck of Many Things, and they say, "Let's unfuck this tree." And it did. It whooshed forward into a spot where it was flourishing and thriving. So that just erased a whole bunch of the early encounters. The Dead Bark Dryad was instead a very happy creature that was able to just assist them and tell them about the region. But the situation at the Three Moons Vault was still terrible, and that's where they had to have gone. So they went into the Three Moons Vault. They met with the werewolves, Argentina Skyrite, and they had learned that Termini Nightsedge, one of the evil wizards from the Tower of High Sorcery, had begun weaving a terrible ritual with the piece of the Rod of Seven Parts to bring the dragon goddess Takeshus back to the world of Krynn, which my party didn't want to have happen at all, because our previous campaign, they defeated Tiamat. So they're like, oh no, they can get her back? What? No. So they were super motivated to do this. So the amazing dungeon crawl of the Three Moons Vault began, and this is where I had actually put some extra magical artifacts within this vault. I made bespoke things that would be fantastic for the players to engage with. And I had almost forgotten. They did not go straight to the world of Krynn. Let's rewind it for just a bit. In between these chapters, this is where I put in a challenging journey to get to the world of Krynn. This is where I really stopped using the ability of the Sanctum to just portal them wherever they need, so I can actually have more of a journey and less of just a tour. So they had to venture out into the Outlands, as described in the Planescape box set, because I love the Planescape box set. I've run lots of parties through Sigil, the City of Doors, and I've run the Turn of Fortune's Wheels campaign back to back. It's a fantastic campaign. It's a fantastic setting, the Outlands and Planescape. So they had to journey throughout the City of Sigil, and they had to fight into the... They had to fight through... Oh, I'm blanking out. The dead people place, the mortuary. That's what it was. Facto Skald had been corrupted by Vecna in order to serve his ends, and they had stolen a Mythallir, a great source of mana, from the City of Sigil. So all of the magical portals had gone dead. So they had to fight through the mortuary of Sigil in order to defeat Facto Skald and get that Mythallir back. And they did. And so, with the mana restored to the City of Sigil, they were able to venture out from the Outlands then, in order to commune with one of the gods of Krynn. And I had given them 3 possibilities. Rorix, the god of the Forge, Kir Jorlith, the god of war, or another one that's name escapes me at the moment. They chose Rorix, the god of the Forge, and they traveled to Moradin's Anvil in the Outlands, where a community of dwarves was beset by basilisks and fire giants. So they had to fight down into them and clear that place out, restore the petrified people, and then, by Rorix, the god of the Forge of Krynn, they were given the ascent to travel to the world of Krynn. And that was phenomenal. Everyone enjoyed that, and they told... The giant was in the middle of building something that they kept for later. And so when they got into Three Moons Vault, I had given them a powerful spellbook, a powerful hammer of Rorix himself, and a item that is basically an iron flask with 3 slots. A Pokeball sort of thing. And then they used the hammer to finish forging what the giant was making, and that became the Tornado Sword that the fighter then carried for the rest of the campaign, which was phenomenal. Now, the main challenge here in the Three Moons Vault, I had to change this a lot, because this is like, oh, there's an Archmage, but the dragon's gonna come and try to stop him. No. Yeah, so like, I just said he and the dragon are just working together, and I made it an ancient lunar dragon, and I made this Archmage Statblock's spell list hit so much harder. this was after the 2024 Player's Handbook had released by this point, and so I gave him the new version of Conjure Minor Elementals, and I opened that combat by dropping a time stop, and then Conjure Minor Elementals, and Fire Shield, and Mirror Image, and then blasting the party with Scorching Rays for buckets full of D8s at a time. And that made for a true challenge along with the Ancient Dragon. They defeated them, of course, but it was one of the closest battles of the campaign up to this point. Now, we made forth for the Tomb of Wayward Souls. Now, once again, I made the journey to... Oh, actually, no, I did the next couple chapters out of order. So I didn't do the Tomb of Wayward Souls yet. I went towards the Dragon Queen's Pride first. And once again, the journey to hell I made much more complicated. I had said to them that they will go, that they need to go to the gate town in the Outlands that leads to Avernus in order to travel there and entreat with these wizards. Entreat with the devils that guard the gates to hell. That was a fantastic bit of situation that we really enjoyed. After getting into Hells, I ran the chapter as written with the Venatrix, the Enrises in a giant demon grinder. Super fun Mad Max action. They rescued the unicorn. They made it to the Red Belvedere Casino. They had an amazing fun time going through the challenges of the casino. I think this chapter is one of the highlights of this campaign, personally. The Red Belvedere feels a lot more fleshed out than a lot of the other places. There's a lot more happening, and it's less of a traditional dungeon crawl, go here, that because you got to kind of play along with the devils in order to not just face the overwhelming forces of hell. So, they got that rod piece, and then they were able to make it back into Sigil. And they made it to... So the Tomb of Wayward Souls, that was in the world of Greyhawk in Oerth. The challenge I put forth to the party in order to get here was that the only person that they knew of that knew the location of this tomb was Baba Yaga, the queen, or the mother of all hags, whom one of my wizards had a attachment to, as she herself was a hexblood sea hag that had revered and almost worshipped Baba Yaga. So they got a little starstruck. So they knew where Baba Yaga's cabin in Oerth was, and they traveled there. They had to do some, swamp exploration, and they found it in the midst of a celebration. As this is where I had a lot of fun with this, a wedding was underway between Baba Yaga and Vecna. And they were like, what is going on here? And they had understood the rules of Fey hospitality. So it became a game of cat and mouse on who could make the other party commit the faux pas, which turned out to be Vecna committing the first faux pas. They defeated him. And at this point, I used the actual stat block from the book as written for Vecna. And it was a fairly easy encounter for them. The stat block as written is not potent. It's not potent, in my opinion. So they defeated him, and then he fell into a pile of snow, because I'm like, simulacrum. Yeah, no, you didn't actually defeat Vecna yet. So Baba Yaga came to, gave them some magic stuff, and said, oh yes, I know where the tomb is. That's going to be over there. And she points it out on the map, and they were able to travel there by boat. And they fought the Kraken on the beach, and by fought the Kraken, I mean the hag wizard captured it in her Pokeball item to save for later, and oh boy, did that come up later. Then the people that wanted the artifacts, Marian and her companions, Lesa Matulin, they wanted the artifacts from the tomb, and they had a little bit of a map, and so this became a super fun puzzly dungeon crawl exploration. It took several sessions. And one of the highlights of the campaign, the Tomb of Wayward Souls. Absolutely enjoyed this. Now, they defeated everything, and then for a final encounter, I put the Arch-Lich Acerak at the end of this tomb after the False Lich, because the False Lich was a pretty weak encounter. But Acerak's stat block from the Tomb of Annihilation is an actual very potent stat block, and that was one of the better fights of the whole campaign between the paralyzing touch, the power word kills. They defeated him as well. They did not find his phylactery, and they went forth, and that is when they got the final piece of the Rod of Seven Pieces from the Tomb of Wayward Souls, and all of the other artifacts and cool magical stuff. So they had a ton of super powerful magic stuff. They were absolutely stacked by this point. They negotiated with the people on their way out that, we'll give these back when we're done, but, Vecna is trying to destroy everything, so we're going to go do that. So, after the Dragon Queen's Pride and that, so the next few chapters in this campaign are the absolute weakest. The ending and the lead up to the ending, because there's 3 chapters left. Chapters 9, 10, 11. And let me just see here. Chapter 9 is only 4 pages. And then the War of Pandemonium is 12 pages. And the Eve of Ruin is 9 pages. Not a lot of content at all. It's very thin, and it's predicated on certain things being done in order, which I did not do. So the Betrayer revealed is supposed to be when Mordenkainen steals the completed Rod of Seven Pieces, because once you find all the pieces, as written in the book, it just goes together like Lego, and you've got the whole artifact. I said, no, this needs to be remade properly. And because now, this is where I diverted quite a bit. Instead of going forth right to Pandemonium, they had to get the rod rebuilt. And because it is the Rod of Absolute Law, I sent them to the Hall of Concordance in the city of Sigil, where the lawkeepers of the multiverse would assist them. So it was a courtroom, and they had to hire a lawyer, and they hired a devil lawyer to help them get in to petition the courts to reform the Rod of Seven Pieces. They hired some good lawyers. They, did some investigation and found some stuff. They got one of the devils that got them through the city of the Gate Town into the Hells to sort of call in a favor for them, which I loved. And they took the case and they went forth, and they got rocket docketed up to the highest court in the land. And this is where one of my players really enjoyed the process, because they are in real life a lawyer. So seeing that play out in the context of a fantasy game was like, I know this. I'm good at this. They had so much fun. It was great. So they got into this courtroom where I had it set up where the leader of the Harmonium faction was sat on a big judge's chair with a big devil and a big angel sat behind him on either side, devil and angel on their shoulders, and they presented their case. They presented the Rod of Seven Pieces, and this is where Vecna played their hand, as Vecna at this point in my writing had corrupted the Inevitables. So they had to fight 2 Marut and a Koliariut in order to survive and try to reforge this Rod of Seven Pieces. And that was an intense battle. Marut and Koliariut from the Monsters of the Multiverse and the Planescape box set are some of the most intense enemies you can put forth into a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. Their attacks auto-hit. A Marut will just bang, bang, 120 damage. Auto-hit, no save, nothing. If they're in front of you, they're flattening you. So they were, again, one of the closest fights that was incredibly thrilling, and there's nothing like that in this book. So I had to make that happen. And I've actually got my Marut here. This is one of the bad boys I painted for that encounter here. Yeah. Yes, this was a physical game. Not in person, miniatures, dice, paper on the tables, no D&D Beyond. So we defeated the Maruts, and they realized they needed to find somewhere else to rebuild it because the court was just in shambles after that battle had broken out. So the paladin with the Hammer of Rorks was like, I'll rebuild it myself. And I'm like, you can certainly try. So he took it to the great hall of the great foundry in the city of Sigil, and they had to negotiate to use the facilities. They went forth, and I'm like, all right, roll me a blacksmithing tool skill check. You are a dwarf, you have proficiency, you have plus 5 to strength, plus 6 proficiency, you have advantage with your friends helping you. Let's go. He rolled a pair of natural ones. So he exploded a little bit as just sort of a funny narrative thing, and they're like, you need to go somewhere else to do this. And so they did. And this is where I folded it back to my previous campaign. Because with this group of people, I had run an epic campaign that started at first and went to max level previously. And in the middle of that campaign, we played through Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. That's right, I'm spoiling more campaigns. Because this is an omnibus campaign that touches so many things with the way I've done it. So, the previous party had raised, oh, again, spoilers, the city of Ythrin, an ancient Netherese city, a flying city, from underneath the Regahid Glacier in Icewind Dale, and became the masters of Ythrin, so it floats around the world doing whatever they like. They turned it into a beautiful community of learning and weather fixing. It's great. So they got to re-explore Ythrin, revitalized by their previous party, which they had so much fun with. And there within the Hall of Transmutation, the Anvil of Disjunction was able to allow them to fully complete the Rod of Seven Pieces. And then they weren't sure where Vecna was. So they're like, let's do it. And I had previously given them a deck of many things, using the deck of many more things. And one of the cards that they had drawn was the map card. And that says, you can figure out where anything is, anywhere. So they're like, they didn't say, where's Vecna? They said, where is Vecna's phylactery? Because they knew about liches and such. So they learned about Pandemonium at that point, and they ventured forth to Pandemonium after stocking up on potions and doing some more shopping, because they knew that would be the sort of final thrust. Now, most of the challenges of the War of Pandemos, as written, are not very potent at all. It's a very short chapter. There's a absolutely pitiful pair of dungeon maps. There's only a few rooms in each of these little dungeons for the Ruinous Citadel and the Web's Edge Tower, the Hurricane Tower here. So they saw the war being waged between the forces of Lolth and the forces of Cass. They used Communion to speak with Lolth and get permission to go and treat with her forces to try to get some tools to help defeat Cass. And they were able to do so successfully with some amazing roleplay and deception checks. So they walked by all the spider forces. And I cut that thing where the Lolth people were actually working for Vecna, because it just did not serve my plot at all. So they negotiated with the spider pit fiend Camlash and got the splinter from the dead oak of Oerth, which was needed to finally defeat Cass. And they went forth into the Ruinous Citadel, where I had the full encounter between the wolf spider and Cass going on at once. And I actually made and 3D printed the wolf spider here and used that. And it was using Cass the Betrayer and the wolf spider stat block, and a whole bunch of the spider fiends. My players absolutely dunked on that encounter so hard. They saw what was happening in there. They threw in the Kraken that they had pokeballed earlier from the Tomb of Wayward Souls and closed the door and let the Kraken take care of most of it, while they carved a shooting hole in the door and were just shooting in as the Kraken wrecked shit. So they dunked on that pretty freaking hard. So I realized, okay, these encounters in this book, and I had upped that encounter. I had put Cass and Mishka and a whole bunch of spider fiends in the same room, and still just got absolutely dunked on. Then the final chapter, Eve of Ruin. Now, this chapter, I basically didn't use any of it. In the way this is written, you get thrown back in time through the Kaleidoscope Cavern to see Cass getting tormented, to see Neverwinter having a new king, and going into a Astral Dreadnought's donjon. And I'm like, this just doesn't, nothing that's happening here in any way relates to what has happened so far. This is just challenges for the sake of challenges, and not even potent ones. So at this point, the Monster Manual had come out, the 2024 Monster Manual. So I'm like, all right, Bet. Let's do better. So, the Cave of Shattered Reflections, instead of reflecting these alternate realities where Vecna's ruin had come forth, I pulled some Terminator shit, and in each of these reflections, the players saw a reality where they were being threatened in the past by powerful forces. I drew from every player's backstory to make a series of epic encounters. Our changeling wizard, who was brought up in the Witchlight Carnival, she saw Mr. Witch and Mr. Light. Oh, that's right, I'm bringing in another campaign's lore into this. Mr. Witch and Mr. Light being threatened by dark angels being sent forth, as I had used the new Empyrean and Diva stat blocks in order to make a powerful encounter there. The Hexblood Hag wizard saw her mother, a sea hag by the name of Brittany, and her coven on a storm-racked sea being threatened by an elemental cataclysm. One of the new stat blocks in the new one, with a few genies urging it on. So that became an epic encounter on the high seas. And then my fighter. Now, I haven't actually revealed this up to this point, but my fighter was a pumpkin. He said, when I said, what do you want to play for Curse of Strahd? He said, Pumpkin Knight. So we used the custom lineage rules and made him a pumpkin race, essentially. So he was a jack-o'-lantern on top of a suit of armor wielding a greatsword for the vast majority of this campaign. Absolutely brilliant. Will-o'-the-wisp, go, go, go. And the pumpkin patch, where the fairy godmother in his lore went bippity-boppity-boop and pumpkins started getting up, was being threatened by Havoc, his new god that he had begun worshipping, as Vecna plucked that dead god from the astral sea and turned it into a blob of annihilation and sent it forth down into this primordial pumpkin patch in order to slay. And then, what I had done for my dwarf paladin, I had shown him a vision of a mountain, the ancient home of the Delzun dwarves within the Forgotten Realms, far before his time, being threatened by the scion of Skuradius from the Glory of the Giants book, another mountain itself come forth to destroy his homeland. So they went forth and fought the giantest of the giants ever, and that was a super thrilling campaign. Super thrilling set of encounters, and that is what led us into our final session, where we went to confront Vecna within his sanctum. And this is called the Hall of Shattered Reflections. Now, the map that they present here turns this encounter, as written, into an absolute slog of hide and go seek, and just Vecna teleporting around. He's got, like, no minions, no extra powers, just 300 hit points in a dream. And I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work at all. So I did away with this map entirely. It was like a great big open throne room that I had put him in. I had given Vecna 4 Death Knight aspirants and a Draco Lich, as well as I had empowered his stat block with a whole bunch of the stuff from the new Lich stat block in the 2024 Monster Manual. And he started the battle with invulnerability up and 3 walls of fire between him and the front entrance. And so, what did my players do? They went hard. They blasted the skeletal Death Knights down with a tidal wave, where the fighter and the paladin went in. The necromancer wizard had summoned up about 8 different minions, ghouls and powerful undead, to be the sort of fodder that went into the melee. The initial bits of the conflict had Vecna throwing huge spells down, using his powerful abilities, and it took them 3 rounds to actually hit him, and he took no damage because of the invulnerability spell. So they were able to study and clock that, and they hit him with a Dispel Magic. They rolled super high, we were able to dispel that, and start fighting him. They captured the Draco Lich using the Pokeball and brought it back out on their side. And it was a thrilling fight. They had all done incredible damage to Vecna. I upped his hit points to 900 from what had been written, and when they brought that down, I had him rip himself in half and have his hands come off. And the second phase that I devised of this boss counter was the Hands of Fate. I had 3D printed some deeply unsettling 6-fingered hands for this encounter. Here, let me see what I got here. Yep. Here's one of them. So yeah, deeply unsettling six-fingered hands. Two of these became the second phase of the boss fight, and I leaned very heavily on some of the final challenges in Critical Role Campaign 3. That's right, I'm spoiling another campaign in what I've brought into this, where I gave him the abilities of Vordo the Golden Weaver. That was one of the lost gods defeated by Predathos back in the Palace of Tengar, which is some Critical Role lore for us now. So, again, spoilers, 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 spoilers. Now, the battle raged on, and I had given them some incredibly potent abilities. A legend, like twice each hand was legendary action casting disintegrate at the end of every player's turn. So there was two disintegrates on every turn to go out. They dodged most of them. And took a lot of damage. And I had made a massive AoE ability that was it basically did meteor swarm damage, but just all as force damage, just to everyone. And they were only able to do that once. It didn't recharge at all. And the party was incredibly low and wounded and in terrible shape. So they pulled their last two cards from the deck of many things. And what did they get? The temple card and the campsite card. They got a long rest and a divine intervention, else they would have failed. They came forth, revitalized by that power, redoubled their assault, and dealt an incredible amount of damage. The stats I had used were basically plus 20 to hit, DC 25 spell save, plus 15 on all saving throws, huge amount of hit points, 25 armor class, and it was an incredibly potent, fast-moving enemy. They defeated it, and they won. And we drew our campaign to a close with a touching series of little vignettes of the party enjoying their retirement. The dwarven paladin went and emptied his book of grudges with the godlike power he now possessed. The pumpkin fighter knight went and discovered that they paved the pumpkin patch and put up a carriage lot. The sea hag Hexblood wizard went back to her swamp, unleashed the Kraken to be her guardian, and released the Dracolich, which went and sought out the forgiveness of Bahamut, as they had never wanted to be an undead creature, so their soul was made whole. And my changeling wizard, they had went to cause more chaos. Actually, hold on. I made a note about that. I gotta double check that. She had seeked the counsel of the Lady of Pain in order to uh, sort of apologize for all of the reality-altering wishes and chaos that they had to engage with, and rejoined the circus for a little bit and got a nice beach house. So, in conclusion, Vecna Eve of Ruin. Uh, this book should have been longer. This book should have had more detail about Neverwinter, about Shadow Neverwinter, about Eberron, about Spelljammer, about Barovia, about Kryn, and it's only by pulling from all of the other wonderful campaigns that I've ran that I was able to make this what I feel is a full and satisfying experience. I don't know if I would run this one again, whereas many of the other campaign books that I have ran, I will run again, certainly. But I'm glad I did it. I'm very glad that I did it. I enjoyed it immensely. I just had to do a little bit extra to make it work. So, should you run Vecna Eve of Ruin? My honest recommendation is if you are a new dungeon master that wants to have like a easy mode high level romp, go ahead and run Eve of Ruin, because it presents to you a series of challenges that are not that difficult for players. They can get a feel for what high-level gameplay is like, but not actually be all that heavily challenged. If you want to put in the work to make this a truly great campaign, there is still a lot to work with here, but it does require you to be able to bridge those gaps and turn this from an errand into a journey. Now, so if you really want to put in that effort, go for it. If you want to get a taste of what high-level D&D is like, go for it. If you want to run a game and just stick with what's in the book, there's just not quite enough here. It just takes a little bit more. So yeah, that is my opinion on Vecna Eve of Ruin, a full, proper post-session review. This campaign in total had taken 71 weeks. We had played almost every week, and we had transitioned to Eve of Ruin. This is about 6 months ago now. So let's see now. That's probably I want to say, hold on. Probably only 18 sessions that I spent with Eve of Ruin, and had I just been running the content in the book, it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, had I just run the content of this book, it probably only would have been 11 sessions. And I don't know if I've ever paced a game that quick. Like, 11 sessions to get from level 10 to 20 just doesn't seem like enough time. But with the content presented, that's what there is. So, adding the extra steps of the journey I felt was essential. I'm never going to run a game paced as slow as, like, Critical Roles. Like, getting from 1 to 15 in 110 sessions, that's not how I'm going to be able to run games. I will often go from 1 to 12 in about 30 sessions. Sometimes around there. My experiences have put it about in that range as my sort of comfort level. But yeah, that is Eve of Ruin. Thank you.